no two companies are exactly alike. Are you properly rewarding people? Do you know where you are in terms of compensation? Thinking very clearly about where you are in the market, where do you think you're going to be in 3-6 months? Building the right structures to be able to scale quickly and maybe scale down quickly, I think is important. Do you create something that is scalable, or do you create something that only works for the here and now?
Hey Gary, how's it going? Welcome to Hiring on All Cylinders.
Hey Chris, I'm good. How are you?
Good. If I would have known we were both musicians, we could have done some kind of jam and wrote a song together on the podcast.
Well, I can't say that I'm quite a musician. I always say this is aspirational. This is my inspiration to learn the guitar. So, but it's cool that we both have guitars in the background.
Yeah, it wasn't planned.
Not at all. Not at all.
So Gary, I'm really excited to speak to you today. I think the audience are going to have a blast listening to your journey and how you advise some of the world's fastest growing companies. I guess to start, it'd be really great to hear a bit about your background, a bit about your journey, and how you got to where you are today, how you made that transition into private equity.
Yeah, sure. So my undergrad was actually in computer science. I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, and I always loved technology. I went to engineering high school. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I got a degree in computer science, and then, probably in my junior year, there was a couple of upperclassmen in class with me that were going to do this thing called consulting. So I'm a first-time college attendee, and I knew nothing about what consulting was, and I learned from them what that was, and I ended up doing an internship with Deloitte in the summer between my junior and senior year, and then I got hired on to Deloitte, and I started at Deloitte as a systems analyst doing consulting work. And at Deloitte, you would pick the package that you work on, so you could be a Siebel or Oracle or PeopleSoft or SAP at the time, and I literally said, I like people and I like software, so I'm going to work at PeopleSoft. That's really how it, how I landed. And as I spent the time working with PeopleSoft and the implementations for companies all around the world, I started to say, well, wow, I can do PeopleSoft HR and payroll and all those things. I can also do HR service delivery model consulting. And I started to expand my skill set and start working at doing that, and now I'm doing HR strategy consulting. And so really on the course of my journey and my career history, I did consulting for about half my career, starting at Deloitte, going on to Bug Consultants. I did work as a Workday consultant. And then the other half was probably spent in corporate America doing everything from being an HRIS manager to leading recruiting operations at Xerox, their outsourcing business. I did OD work, organizational development and leadership planning and succession planning and countrywide. So I did a lot of different things, which landed me in the role where I was the VP of HR Solutions at Mitel. And Mitel had an investor, or was owned by a private equity firm called Francisco Partners. So through that relationship, over the time I was there, I was doing initiatives with the operating team over at Francisco Partners and got to know them. So presentations on technology and all these things. And, we connected I connected with one of the HR operating partners, and basically he said, hey, how would you like to do what you're doing at this company for a lot of different companies in private equity? I said, oh, well, that sounds really interesting. never thought about it, didn't know much about private equity. So I decided to take the leap about 4.5 years ago, and I've been in this space ever since. And that's really the short version of how I got to private equity.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think we've seen over the last several years that private equity, venture capital are using that function, that expertise to kind of separate them and differentiate them. When they're looking to bring on investments and provide that leadership and that advice to their portfolio companies. I guess from your standpoint, was going into private equity what you imagined? I know you said that you took the leap. Did you kind of take a blind leap? Did you really know what you were getting into? Did it meet your expectations? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, being in consulting, I had this natural desire and ability to learn a lot of different things, work with a lot of different companies, have that are days that are different every day. So that was a natural fit, and going into private equity served that need. So it was really a good fit for me. And I think it's exactly where I should be. I did not plan to be in private equity, had no thoughts about it in the past, and really didn't know much about the industry at all. And just taking a step back, sort of really describing my role and sort of how I fit in private equity and why it matches my background. So I work for an operating team called Francisco Partners Consulting, and we're dedicated to the Francisco Partners portfolio companies. And really, we serve two functions. One is we do diligence on companies. So we're helping investors look at companies from a talent lens. So what does a talent look like at the executive level? What are some of the operational elements of the talent function or the HR function? How well is it functioning? How are employees in this particular deal in terms of the culture, and what is the match for the overall thesis and the plan for the company? So taking all those things together, we provide that feedback into the investment team so they can make their determinations for how they should invest or what risks they're taking. And then on the other side of the house, once the company is in the portfolio, which you mentioned, we do quite a bit of work around working with executive teams on any range of talent initiatives. That could be executive placements and recruiting to advising on HRIS and operations. I focus primarily on org effectiveness and HR operations, but we have a team that we work with that do a variety of things that we really work with the portfolio companies to create value for those companies and help them to be successful. So, for me, it was a perfect combination of all my background and skill sets, and also a great opportunity to do something dynamic and different and allow you to try different skills and grow as a person. So it's a perfect match in my book.
That's awesome.
It's a good decision.
So you do the kind of due diligence part, support Francisco Partners on that side, and then once the deal is done and the investment's been made, you support and help grow the portfolio companies through various different kind of HR and human capital activities. I guess from doing that for so many companies and having that variety of scope, you must see lots of different challenges, lots of different things that go well, that don't go well. From your point of view, what's the most common challenge that companies are facing, when you're working with them? Is there something that kind of sticks out to you, or a few things that stick out?
Yeah, I mean, I think any company coming into or either going from public to private, or if you're carving out of we do quite a bit of carve outs where we take a division of a business and pull it out of a larger company and create a standalone company. All of those companies are experiencing a tremendous amount of change, whether it's changing leadership or whether it's changing how they operate, or change from being a really large company to being a very small company. All those things are big change elements. I think one of the big challenges that I always see companies face is, how do we get employees and teammates through that change? So how do we help them understand that, although this is different, there's going to be a great opportunity for you in this company going forward. So making sure that the message is right, make sure you're answering questions from employees, making sure you have the story right for how you recruit people, how do you properly incentivize people from compensation and rewards, all those things in terms of the change and how those implications affect retention and recruiting and culture are really a lot of the big challenges you're kind of dealing with, and helping to align leadership teams around those goals, and are aligning leadership teams toward the strategy and helping to filter that through the organization. Those are really some of the bigger issues that I see. I mean, there are lots of other things. I mean, you're right. We have companies, that are very small, and we have companies that are pretty large. So they all have a different set of issues. Some of them are global, some of them are US only, some of them are only based in Europe. So they all come with a varying set of issues, and they're also in different industries. Although they're all technology companies, they're in different industries as well, which also has its own unique challenges in dealing with in dealing with companies and dealing with employees.
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com.
When you're working with these companies, are those challenges like very obvious, or do they require, quite a lot of digging and, going and speaking to people and really getting under the hood of the business? Like, how do you go about understanding what those challenges are?
Yeah, I think there's some challenges that are obvious, and there are certain things that if I'm going to carve out a division out of a company, I've probably done, 13, 14 different carve-outs over the last 4 years. And so there are certain things that if you're going to do that type of work, there are going to be challenges that are there. But my view is you always have to go into it assuming that you don't know what the challenge is going to be, because you really need to dig in and really understand, not just from the outside, but really spend time with leaders and with employees and with groups of people to really understand what may be happening in that specific company, because no two companies are exactly alike. There are similarities, but they all have their unique cultures. They have their unique ways of approaching things and the way people work and connected. Are they remote? Are they on site? Are they, in terms of are they growth, or are they sort of being more, efficient, operational improvement play? So I think you have to really go in and look at it from the lens of understanding what the strategy is of the company, and then understanding that specific company, talking to leaders, talking to employees, and really getting a sense of what's really going on to get the right picture.
I'm really interested at the angle of when you're doing due diligence for the business that are maybe looking to take on investment, because I think sometimes as operational functions, HR leaders, recruiting leaders, they can be so kind of involved and in the weeds of just trying to get the jobs done, helping teams grow, helping sort out issues on a reactive basis, that they're maybe less concerned with how are we generating value, how are we increasing the value of this business, and putting it in the best position to either raise money, exit, or generate the best returns. And I think that, most likely HR can have a big influence on some of those drivers and some of those levers. When you're looking at a business, or let's say, I was to come to you and we were one of the businesses you were looking at in the due diligence process, what are the things that you really look for in an investable company in regards to their human capital kind of setup and organization? Are there things that have really impressed you, or things that kind of stand out, things that would identify this as a great company is being run really well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, whether it's investable or not, I guess that's not necessarily the outcome my work is doing per se, right? That is, for the deal teams, and this is throughout private equity, right? That's probably really the deal teams to decide, or investment teams. But what I'm really trying to produce is a picture of where the company is. So there are some companies who have great cultures, they're thriving, and really what you're trying to do is sustain that and push that forward and add to it. There's some companies that have, very difficult cultures that's very hard to work in. The employees have been through a significant amount of change, or maybe there are things that have gone awry in the past, and you're trying to address those things. So it's really giving them a lens, into what those companies are like. It's more information than it is, hey, this company is this way, so don't invest, or this company is that way, so, do invest. It's more so this is information to inform what you're going to have to do to create value, or to actually grow this company. So I think, you know, a lot of things we're looking at, you know, I would say from a practitioner standpoint, you know, outside of sort of Francisco Partners in general, I think what we'd be looking at is, you know, how leadership team alignment, right? I think, you know, anybody in this space, when I talk to other PE talent leaders and talk about sort of what they do, and this is kind of common across the space where you're looking at, well, what is the alignment of leadership team? Are they working well together? You know, if you're in a room of people and, you know, one person's doing all the talking, you know, or is it multiple people that are, you know, that kind of own the areas and they really understand how the company works and they can deliver in their function. Other things you're looking at is like, what does it take operationally for HR? Like, is the function itself working well? Do they have the right systems in place? Do they have you know, is it a bunch of manual processes, like a work you're going to have to invest to build up processes? Are there, you know, duplications of efforts happening all across the organizations? Are people aligned in the function itself? I think those sorts of things. You're looking at the employee population. Are they happy to be there? Are they engaged? So looking at engagement survey results. Are turnover numbers, you know, do you see a spike in attrition? You see high attrition numbers specifically for the company. So those are some of the factors and things you want to look at just as a professional in those areas. I think every team and every investor approaches that differently as to what they do with that information, you know, because some may say, hey, you know, these are great things to know, and these are what I need to know to invest in, or some would say, oh, this doesn't work for me. But I don't think that is a criteria from our standpoint in terms of, like, we're not determining the investment. We're really giving information for the investor to determine based on their criteria.
It's really interesting. So, I mean, some of those things might seem like at a high level, like quite obvious, but I don't think they actually are, because of what you mentioned. You know, when you're in such a high growth company, you're dealing with so many things coming at you as a HR leader. There's sometimes taking a step back and looking at those like key criteria. So I think from what you just said, you know, leadership alignment, that leadership alignment's really key. Then automation of process. So, you know, that's also key. So the right systems, the tools, that you're not just doing everything manually, all your data is collected properly and in the right place. Then you've got the culture piece and engagement. Are you looking at stuff like, does stuff like Glassdoor even come into the picture for you? Do you take any, does that matter?
Yeah, we do. I think it's like when you go to a restaurant, right? You look at, you know, reviews and you're like, you know, maybe it doesn't tell me everything about the restaurant, but if I consistently see, you know, 1,000 reviews and 300 of them are saying the food is bad, you know, I probably won't go there, right? It's the same thing about Glassdoor. I think people have their own varying opinions about it, but again, I think it's a data point that you can use for, you know, understanding what might be some of the issues that are where in a company, or where to drill down into, or what might be some things going on. That doesn't necessarily mean Glassdoor is 100% accurate all the time, but I think you can see trends. I think you can use it for, you know, just data gathering and guiding maybe some of the questions you might have about a company, or guiding maybe what the perception is out in the market that may help that company figure out, well, how do we need to change that perception even if it's not true? Or if it is true, well, we need to change something if it's negative. And also, not just the negative, but there are also positive things that people say on Glassdoor, right? It's, you know, it's a great place to work. It's, you know, it's fun, it's exciting. And you take those things and you also understand about a company what you don't want to kill. You know, you don't want to kill the culture when you're going through changes. You want to support, you know, some of the things that may be motivating people to work at a particular company, you know, because people are a very important part of the business. So you want them to be motivated. So you can also use it as a data point to figure out, well, what is motivating people about this particular company, and how do we support that so that can continue to success for the company? So I think it's, you know, again, as another data point, you know, is at the end all be all, especially when you're talking about companies outside the US, but it's definitely something that's useful in my opinion.
Yeah, the restaurant review analogy is a great one, actually. Because, you definitely should give a few bad reviews, but yeah, if the overwhelming sentiment is negative, you're
Yeah,
probably going to
yeah,
avoid it.
yeah. No, my wife always she's a stickler for reviews, and she's always like, yeah, if we go to a place and it has a bad reviews, I'm like, oh, let's give them a chance. She's like, oh, see, I told you, see, the food was gonna be bad.
Yeah.
That's what the review said.
Your wife sounds like a temp customer. Um, yeah.
She is.
So, and then the final one was retention. And I guess, again, all of this stuff, is going to be on a case-by-case basis. But are there particular strategies that you think can really help the company's retention, or anything that you see that it is more universal across different companies that you think, okay, this works typically?
Yeah, I mean, I think retention is a big one. I think that leadership alignment and direction and vision planning and showing people where the company is going, why they're here, what is their contribution to the overall company. I think taking the vision, the strategy, and taking it down to a level where employees can feel like I'm a part of this. It makes sense what I do, and I'm connected to a larger vision in some way, shape, or form. I think it's important for retention. There's the obvious things such as, are you properly rewarding people? Do you know where you are in terms of compensation, in terms of the market where you are? Are your competitors, where people are going when they're leaving you, are they paying more? Are they, and if that's the case, do you need to adjust? Maybe you don't, maybe you do. That's a decision you need to make as to where you're trying to compete on talent. I think, again, that the culture piece is important, but also people always say people don't leave company, they leave managers. And I think one of the things I've seen people do well in terms of companies is train managers. So there are lots of managers in companies who don't have quite as much experience. Maybe they were promoted because they were an exceptional performer, but they don't really have management skills. So being able to teach people how to properly manage other employees, how to do a one-on-one, how to have a team meeting, what are the things that you need to coach people on in terms of developing skills, how to give feedback properly. Those sorts of things, I believe, create environments where retention can be supported. So I think it's as you said, every company is different on those angles, but you need to figure out, well, what is it, and if people are leaving and you're not having retention issues, you depend on why. I mean, I think that's where doing culture surveys, doing exit interviews, doing, understanding, and they call them stay interviews, I think it is, where you're understanding people, understanding their critical talent and like, what is it that makes them stay? What is it that will make them stay? Being proactive in those areas, knowing all that data and information, and just informs you on what it is for you that will create retention. But, I think the things that I mentioned are some of the ones that I would say that probably work in any scenario.
And do you have like a benchmark of what you consider to be like good retention? Like whether it's like 80%,
Yeah, I mean, I think we benchmark across the portfolio. So we do metrics across the portfolio that we use to benchmark. So we use that as a benchmark in ourselves. But we also have external benchmarks that we use, from other sources that we say, okay, well, this particular survey shows that retention is here. So there are all sorts of sources, comp surveys and things like that, comp providers who actually provide retention information as well. So we use those as benchmarks also. And we look at them by country, I look at them by industry. It really, again, it's just a guide to say, okay, well, if this survey says a good retention is 10% and you're at 25%, then okay, well, we probably have a problem, that you're really not even, on par with what the market is saying. And then there's probably some issues there. And then, there are factors that happen, macro events that happen like COVID or recessions or the great awakening or resignation or whatever we call it nowadays. All those factors also sort of put pressure on what retention should be, and you have to kind of adjust and figure out, well, given those macro dynamics that are going on, is what we're doing in alignment with all those things. So I think it's, I would say multiple sources. But yes, we do use it. We do benchmark it, and we do look at it against those benchmarks.
Awesome, Ben. A nice segue, really, into where we are now. And I think the world has gone through a really interesting couple of years from COVID and this very sharp V-shaped kind of recession to this period of just incredible demand and growth, and then now going into a period of some economic uncertainty. And I guess for companies and HR leaders, there may be thinking about how to set themselves and their companies up for success from a HR standpoint. Is there anything that you're doing to advise your companies, or advice that you would give more generally to human capital leaders going through this period of time, and what are some of the important things that they can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to that point around retention. I mean, I think some of those same factors, you have to understand what's happening in the macro environment. So if we know inflation is putting pressures on compensation, do you need to go and take a look and see where your compensation is, and do you need to make adjustments? Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. It depends. Do you need to look at your overall cost envelope for the company? That's something that leaders have to look at and see, okay, based on where the market is going, how are we faring in those markets from a revenue and EBITDA standpoint? So I had to kind of make decisions based off of those factors as well. I think we always coach companies to be thinking about those things proactively and not reactively. I think you have to always understand where your critical talent is. And I think this is a really important factor. You need to understand, so where are the people that are, if they left your company, will create great harm. And doing that proactively and building out, the right retention strategies, for those individuals specifically, on top of what you're trying to do for the company retention wise, for, creating the right environment. I think being smart about those things are also pretty important, because there are lots of people in when you're thinking about the strategy and where you're trying to go, if you don't understand the people that are going to contribute to getting you to that point, you're just going to be in a world of hurt, because it's just, you may, while you're thinking maybe this person over here is the real contributor, maybe the person he's over here is it, but you got to sit down and really understand that and map it to what your strategy is. So I think having people be more proactive, thinking very clearly about where you are in the market, where do you think you're going to be, in 3-6 months, like thinking about where things are happening. Nobody's crystal ball, nobody can predict the future, but you have to be thinking ahead and planning accordingly and figuring out what that means for you from a talent perspective. And I think that's what we advise companies to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess one of the things that a lot of the leaders that I'm speaking to are trying to balance is, during COVID, a lot of companies made decisions, to maybe downsize teams, or to maybe stop using certain vendors or tools and technologies, with the idea that it wouldn't be V-shaped recovery. And a lot of the leaders that I speak to are kind of concerned about maybe making some of those decisions and then being caught on the back foot again. Because I think over the last 12 to 18 months, a lot of those kind of decisions have meant that people have been playing catch up for the last 12 months and don't want to do that again. Are there things that the leaders can do to avoid that? Or is it because, like you said, no one has a crystal ball, you're just going to do the best that you can with the data that you have at the time? Or do you think there's things that they can do to set themselves up to not make that same mistake or not be left on the back foot?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I think it's probably more of you don't have that crystal ball. I think most people would love to be able to say, hey, I know where the market's going to go in 3 to 6 months. So then I can, hire hire up accordingly or skill accordingly. I think the one thing that people can do is make sure they're creating pipelines of talent. So, while you may not be recruiting right now, are you building pipelines for if you do need to recruit, or you do need to ramp up recruiting, or do you have the right people in place to be able to do that for you, or do you have a model in your HR function that is, expandable? Can you scale up and scale down easily? So I think building the right structures to be able to scale quickly and maybe scale down quickly, I think is important. So having that base infrastructure in place from an HR function or recruiting standpoint, I think is important. And this could be for some companies, they decide, hey, instead of having 3 recruiters, they might have 2 recruiter plus 1 external recruiter, right? And then having that in place so that, I can kind of scale up and down with that external recruiter based off of the needs. But at the same time, we can maintain our presence in the marketplace. We can be talking to passive candidates. We could be talking to people and keeping relationships going so that our pipeline is strong and creating, even diverse pipelines and making sure that you're doing that as well, so that you're not caught at the place where, oh, I turned all the engines off and I got to turn them all back on from a hiring perspective, specifically. I think that could be the same approach in any part of the business. It's like, do you create something that is scalable, or do you create something that only works for the here and now and, takes you a lot of time to build back up to get to where you need to go? So I think overall what I'm saying is you need flexibility. Yeah. You need the ability to flex and need to be able to grow, because I don't think anybody knows for sure what's going to happen, but you need to be able to be agile enough to both get the work you need to get done today, but also be able to quickly scale as you need to going forward. And that's easy for us to say, right? We're in the technology space, right? A lot of technology companies, that's a lot easier than maybe some manufacturing company or someone who's like, having large equipment or something they need to get going, and you got to really make long-term decisions. So it's probably easier in my space working with technology companies than it would be in some other spaces, but that would be my advice to companies.
And to finish things off, Garry, it's a question I ask everyone, but it'd be really interesting your insight, is what are you most excited about regarding the future of human capital?
Yeah, I think, it's been interesting to see the progression of human capital over the last, 15, 20 years. Being a technology person at heart and at core, I really like how the application of technology has really changed the dynamics that are happening in human capital. I think we're doing a lot more things with AI. We're doing a lot more things with data, and we're producing a lot more data. And I think what's going to be interesting going forward is what we do with that data and how we use data to make more predictive decisions about employee movement or potential resignations or potential, needs that employees might have, or can we see sentiment? And I think some of that's happening today with some vendors building that or have already built some of that stuff like sentiment analysis and things like that. But I think just the application of technology to evolve the space excites me in particular. And then I think the other thing I would think about is like creating different pipelines for talent. So I know companies are considering and playing with things like, do I need a bachelor's degree for this particular role? Like, does that open up new pathways for other people when, for this particular role, it doesn't require a bachelor's degree? Maybe it requires a certification or a skill set that needs to be developed. I think that just opens up opportunities for people. And I think the more we can explore ways of bringing in different kinds of talent from different backgrounds and perspectives and not just one way, I think the better off we'll be as an industry, and just create more opportunities for other people. So those are two things I think that really excite me about HR and where we're going. I think where it's going to evolve in the future.
Absolutely. It's going to be very exciting to see where we are in 5 years' time. And
absolutely. It's like, are we going to work from home or are we going to be working on site? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
It's a big debate, right? It's that's also an interesting evolution. Like the way work is going to get done, and it's already changed, right? It's so it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future with how we're delivering work and how we're working together. whether in person or remotely, or whether it's a mix or hybrid. I don't know if anybody really knows, but
Yeah, I agree. I don't think anyone really knows. I think that's it. We're all trying to figure this out the best we can. Go. But
that's right. That's right.
but thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else will too. So see you soon.
Thanks, Tris. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun.